Hello, I'm Jessie the Sleepy Koala, and today I will be talking about The Memory of Babel by Christelle Davos. The Memory of Babel is the third book in the Mirrorvisitor quartet, and follows Ophelia as she travels to Babel after she escaped her home ark of Anima in pursuit of her husband Thorn. While there, she joins the good family so that she can work in the Memorial of Babel and try and find out the secrets of the Secretarium, the secret globe that hovers in the middle of the library. Much to her surprise, she finds that Thorn already works there and is the mysterious Sir Henry, who her division of the good family, the Forerunners, work for. Unfortunately, finding Thorn does not fix all of Ophelia's problems, and if anything, she then goes through a myriad of other problems post-finding him, because the two of them do not know how to talk to each other very well or have very good communication at all. On top of this, there are also people who seem to either be dying or being semi-comatose out of fear, and nobody quite knows what's going on. Eventually, Ophelia and Thorn are able to discover the answer to not only the problem Thorn was working on when he set up the reading groups, but also find out more information about their overall adversary, God, who for most of this book is actually kind of out of the picture, which I do have some things to talk about with. This book is very introspective in the way that it looks at characters and the way that it focuses so much on the character relationships, particularly between Ophelia and all of the new friends that she has met, but then as well her relationship with Thorn, which comes to a head in this book. Unlike The Missing of Claire de Lune, there is a lot less plot, I would say, in this book compared to the last one. This one does still have its plot lines. It's got this mysterious force that seems to be killing people or putting them into the asylum, and nobody really knows why. But for at least half the book, the plot is just Ophelia trying to find Thorn, and then after that, it's them working together on a problem that they're not quite sure what the problem is that they need to solve, because they just won't talk to each other properly about it. That being said, I would say the second half of this book is a lot more enticing than the first half of this book. The first half gets bogged down by the school plot with the good family and Ophelia joining the Forerunners, and it just feels like she got stuck. Maybe it's that I'm getting a little bit old for school plots, or that I'm just not as interested in them as I used to be. But when she joined the school, I was kind of resigning myself to it being this monotonous march along while she does a bunch of school things that I guess move the plot along, but do they really matter in the overall scheme of things? And yes, what she does with the good family and with the Forerunners does overall help, because it gets her into the Secretarium to meet with Thorn, and then they are reunited and they can move on from there. However, I do question whether this was the most interesting way that this could have been done. The mystery aspect of the plot, however, I think was handled much better than in The Missing of Claire de Lune, where it was fairly obvious from the get-go who the bad guy was going to be, or at least you could really pick it out pretty quickly with the number of characters that were involved and there only being so many people to choose from. At least in this book, the sweeper is not a very prominent figure at all, and honestly, he's a blink and you miss him type character, which is the whole point, is that people don't notice him, and that's why he's there, is so that he won't be noticed. What's more, whenever we interact with the sweeper up until the point that it's discovered who he is, it's never in the context of Madame Silence's death or of the insanity of Mediana. The sweeper doesn't come up in these contexts, so it is a lot more subtle of who this actually is, but it makes a lot of sense, and I did really enjoy at the very end when Ophelia is looking back on the picture she has of the exchange from 50, 60 years ago, and she can pick out the sweeper now that she knows what she's looking for. I thought that was a really nice touch, and I thought that that was a really nice way to do this character that is a one-book character, but is still very meaningful within that one book. But I think the biggest letdown with this book is actually just the fact that it doesn't deal with God really at all. Yes, we get the reveal at the end that God is Yuleia Gond and that she was the writer of the children's books. That doesn't really deal with the problem that we've been dealt. That's just giving us information to then deal with the problem in the future. And yes, this information is necessary and needed to be able to try and fight back against God, but it just made this book stand out in a way that I don't really want a book to stand out. It stood out as the oddball, the odd duck, the book that doesn't fit with the rest of them. we leave the end of the second book with what feels almost like a timer over our head. Not only do we have God now fully present on the scene, but we've also just been introduced to the other who apparently is destroying the arcs, which we get some of in The Missing of Claire de Lune. So suddenly everything feels very relevant to the here and now, and that there's things that we need to be doing presently to try and stop God, to stop the other, to save the arcs. But yet, we then get a book that has a 3-year time jump into the future and then spends the rest of the book in a library looking up information. And while I do love character development, and I know it sounds like I have a lot of criticism for this book, and I do have criticism for this book, but I did really enjoy it. And I think for a book itself, like as a self-contained book, this was actually very good. School plot withstanding, but the actual book itself is really good, and I did really enjoy it. It just stands out so much within the series of where it is placed, and the stakes in it just feel so weird, because it feels like we've just put this entire conflict onto the back burner so that we can go look up some information and try and find more things out before the big conflict happens. And the book does play into this to an extent. We don't really get that much destructions of the arcs in those 3 years after Ophelia leaves the pole and when she goes to Babel. There's not that much, and this is brought up in the book as an explanation. Yet at the very end of the book, we finally get some destruction happening right there in Babel, and everything is suddenly go, go, go to get ready for the next book. And I think it just would have worked a lot better if we hadn't been given that go, go, go feeling at the end of the second book. I think it could have been done where we still keep all of the key players that are introduced without putting this almost pendulum above our characters' heads to try and save the world so quickly. And I think that would have made this book fit a lot better into its placement within the series. But enough about the plot, because really I don't have that much more to say about it. Like, this entire series, not just this book, all of the books are so character-based and about characters and their relationships with others that I think I just need to move on to talking about those actual relationships. Because this is a big book in terms of relationships for Ophelia and Thorn in particular. They have got a lot that they need to work through. And something that I find really interesting is the end of book 2. Ophelia clearly cares about Thorn. She has developed some level of feelings for him, but I wouldn't say that she is in love with him simply because of the timeline of the second book doesn't allow for someone to really fall in love unless it's suddenly insta-love, and this isn't the series to do that. This is a slow burn romance that is clearly taking us all the way to book 4 before we start getting real payoffs for it. So I don't think that she's in love with him at the end of the second book, but I think by the time she reaches Babel, she is, and it's just so fascinating because she hasn't seen him for almost 3 years. But that absence, the whole absence makes the heart grow fonder type thing. I think that Ophelia learned to fall in love with the idea of her husband while she was separated from him, because that's what she had to hold on to. And those growing feelings that had started when they were together and when Thorn confessed his love to her, they're going to just continue to sit and fester within her while she is away and while she is worried about him. And that worry just plays into it even more. And you can see just how much she is hanging on to the hope of finding him, but then everything being better when she does find him. And it isn't. It is just terrible. Really, their first conversation is the most awkward, disappointing conversation that it probably could have been. But the thing that's so sad about it is why it's so awkward and why it's so disappointing. Ophelia has been waiting to find the husband that she left, the husband that she married at the end of the second book, who will awkwardly confess his love to her, but then also will do everything within his power to try and keep her out of anything that she could be involved in. He spent the entirety of the second book doing everything he could to pull her out of the investigation for the missing of Claire de Lune. And this book is just the complete opposite. Instead, he puts his trust into her and says, I need your help and I need you to do this for me. And she doesn't see that. She doesn't see that he is reaching out in his own way by trying to give her freedom to help him when he is in need. But all she wants is the husband that she left, and that husband would have pushed her away, would have tried to keep her out of everything, would have made all of the decisions on his own without any regard for her. And to be fair, Thorn still does make decisions without regard for Ophelia. And these really hurt her. She is really upset by the fact that he replaces her. But at the same time, for their disguise to keep up, that is kind of necessary. And even though Thorn is trying to give her more control in helping him, he's still being incredibly controlling about it. He still wants her to do it in the exact way that he wants. So there is still that element there. He is still being the controlling person that he is, except instead of trying to control the narrative by keeping her out of it, he's trying to control the narrative by making her do only what he wants her to do, which is where they eventually come to head when Ophelia goes to find information, and this is the information that Thorn needs as well. At that point in time, we could have taken a shortcut through the story if Ophelia was actually able to give Thorn that information, but she's blinded by the fact that he's trying to keep up this ruse, but is also controlling her. Let's not discount the fact that he is being controlling in the way that he's trying to keep up the ruse. So she doesn't give him the information, but he's frustrated because she's going off and doing what she wants, which is the same thing as before. Like I said in the Missing of Claire de Lune video, they're two peas in the same pod. They both act in such similar ways, and that's really why they clash in the way that they do. But because Thorn is reaching out in his own way and he's trying to give her more of an ability to help, he's waiting for her to reach out at the same time, and she's not doing so. She is just expecting him to act in a certain way, but never once when they first meet up actually shows him that her feelings have changed and that she now cares much more for him than the last time that they saw each other. And Ophelia comes to this realization herself when she is in the tank. She had expected words and gestures from Thorn that she had never offered him. At no time had she said we. At no time had she reached out to him. At no time had she laid herself bare. The truth, the only truth, was that she had been cowardly. There is just so much heartbreak in this book. Reading through their relationship just absolutely tore at my soul because I just wanted things to be okay for them, and it wasn't going to get better until one of them took that first step, and that person really needed to be Ophelia in this case. And it was just so satisfying when they did finally reconcile with each other in a way that they have never been reconciled before, and they were able to move forward in such a way that we never thought that they ever would, because it was such a big thing in the first couple of books that Ophelia would never have sex with Thorn, and yet at the end of the book they do. And it was such a sweet scene to end the book on. Ophelia and Thorn really are two opposites that completely attract each other, and it is fascinating reading a book and just seeing how they've come together and just how much I'm behind the relationship as well, because the idea of opposites attract it is a bit foreign to me. Like, the people that I have dated, my husband, we're very similar people. We like similar things. We do things in similar ways. We're the definition of like attracts like, not opposites attract. So the idea of opposites attract, I've never quite understood how it can work sometimes, but this book really shows that you can have opposites that attract and that it can work, that you can click together perfectly, and that you can be the perfect couple together. You just have to be able to get there first. But Ophelia spends so much time in this book thinking that she's disappointing Thorn when he has done nothing to show her that that is the case. But it's her own insecurities of feeling like she is disappointing and that she can never live up to what he's after that drive this internal conflict of hers. I still remember from Missing at Clair de Lune how Thorn thinks that she's brave and how she can completely throw him with just a few words. None of that has changed. He still thinks the world of her. It's just that she's so afraid of disappointing him that fear is getting in the way of her being able to see past the fact that he is not disappointed in her, that he is working with her, that she can provide a valuable asset to him with her place in the Forerunners. But of course, the most tragic scene between them is when they're having their fight out the front of the Babel Memorial and Thorn uses his claws on Ophelia. And I remember the first time that I read this scene, I was shocked, I was horrified, I was appalled. Like, I felt betrayed on her behalf because I vividly remember from the second book of him standing in his office and going, "I will never hurt you," to her after she indicates that he looks really scary. So for him to use his claws on her was devastating. This was probably one of the worst things that he could have done. Except it gets even worse because then we find out later that it didn't happen on purpose. It happened by accident. And then knowing that, it takes all of the horror and the heartbreak of that moment and puts the spin on it of think about how heartbroken Thorn will be if he ever finds out what happened. And not that they should be keeping secrets from each other, but I can very much understand why Ophelia is like, I will never tell him that this occurred, because it would break him. It would just destroy him. It's the thing that he's terrified of most, both in hurting Ophelia, but also just the loss of control of his claws. Oh my gosh, the heartache in this book. This book broke me. Reading scenes like that, both of them, the scene where it happens and the scene where Ophelia figures out he's not in control of his claws anymore, these scenes just hit me where it hurt. They really, really dug in deep to the place of where I care about characters, and they grabbed and they twisted. They twisted hard. So for all the complaints I had about the placement of this book in the overall series, the actual content of this book is stunning. It's so good. The relationship stuff in here it's just perfect. It's the exact sort of angst that we needed in this series before we really get the payoff of their relationship finally working. And it's why it's just so satisfying when later in the book and they've finally reconciled and we get scenes like when they're at Lazarus's home and he leaves the room and Thorn just collapses and he's no longer sitting ramrod straight on the sofa. He has just collapsed back against it because he trusts Ophelia. And I think that's what has been missing so much from their relationship, is this trust between them. Trust that the other person can make decisions and that those decisions are the right ones to make. Trust that they can work together and trust that they care about each other. I said in my Missing of Clair de Lune video that book is about how love doesn't solve everything and that if you don't trust people, then it just doesn't really matter. This book is them learning that they can trust each other. And once they have that trust there, then those walls begin to break down and just, yeah, Thorn collapsing on this sofa in front of Ophelia because Lazarus has left the room. It was such a husband and wife moment that was just so funny to see, because of course now he feels like he can relax around her. He doesn't need to hold up this persona of being rigid and cold all of the time because he's not that person all of the time. And Ophelia is the person who's broken through those walls and can see that. But either way, I love them, and I love that they finally worked through their shit so that they can finally be happy together. We can have this payoff now, and it's just gonna be so good in book 4 to finally have them working together as a team, and I'm really looking forward to it. To talk about some other minor character things, there was just a few things that jumped out to me. The first one was Archibald and his newfound powers that just happened to manifest in the time period that we needed them to manifest. And there is a line in The Missing of Clair de Lune that is, I think, meant to foreshadow the fact that he is actually the great-grandson of Madame Hildegard, but the line is really throwaway in Missing of Clair de Lune, so it just feels very convenient, is the thing, that he suddenly turns up with space-time powers, and it's exactly what they need when they need it so that they can go through all the compass roses and try and find Landmark and also rescue Ophelia. It's just a bit convenient in its timing, but I can get past that. That's okay. The one thing I wanted to say about Ophelia as a character herself in this book, and this I was frustrated about, she kind of goes backwards a little bit in character development. In the second book, she spends so much time getting independence by doing these investigations and being given all of these different roles where she now has responsibilities. And in this book, she joins the good family and is just put back under the thumb of other people and now has Mediana as a bully, and it just feels like other people are just constantly controlling her again. And that was frustrating after seeing her get independence. And I get that in this situation, she would have to give up some independence, but it just felt like people were controlling her yet again after it seemed like we had finally been getting away from that. So that's a bit of Ophelia criticism I have about this book. Okay, I largely just have some world building stuff to go through now and then some foreshadowing stuff, but I will give spoiler warnings before any of the foreshadowing stuff comes up, but there are some things that I really would like to talk about in terms of foreshadowing for the next book. But in terms of world building, the first thing is actually just a translation thing, and I'm really interested if anyone listening, watching this and has gone this far, has read this book in French. Did the mispronounced surname of Gond to God work better? Because I don't think it works super well in English. I wouldn't say that Gond is a surname that would be mispronounced as God. I don't think they sound similar, and I think it's pretty clear that there's an N in there. So I don't think that works quite as well as in English as it might in French. But if anyone has read the French versions of this and knows of it, please comment below of whether you thought it worked better or whether you think it's about the same. I'm thinking it's like similar to the whole like Tom Marvolo riddle, I am Lord Voldemort type thing. That is very clever in English, and then in other languages they needed to change bits of it to make it work better with the language, and it doesn't always work as well. So I'm wondering if this is just a translation quirk that meant that it didn't work quite as well. World building! This book, we expand the world quite a bit. We go to Babel, a completely new arc that's got a completely different culture, and it's very different to both the Pole and Anima. Both the Pole and Anima are very insulated in that they're the single family and the powerless, and that's about it. You don't really have that much cross-integration from other arcs of people with other powers joining the society. Whereas with Babel, that's the whole deal, is that the society is made up of not just people from Babel, but from so many other places as well. And that Babel has really taken on the different technologies that come out of the other arcs and introduced it to where they are and are able to use it as their own. In terms of specific powers, we get Cyclopeans who are able to manipulate gravity and allow the bird trains to run. Then we have the Phantoms who are able to phantomize objects from a solid to a gas state, which they use in the memorial to move around documents, and also Thorn gets his food that way. And we also have the necromancers who are able to control temperature and are able to keep the secretarium at a particular temperature and humidity that works best for the documents. There's also the transcendiums and another device used within the memorial, and I didn't catch who makes them, but there's also those as well. And finally, it is on to the foreshadowing part. So from this point onwards, there will be spoilers for book 4 as well as the rest of the series, but really I'm only talking about how things are set up for book 4. So if you don't want spoilers for the next book, then skip over the rest of this one and I will see you all at the next video. But for those of you who are staying, let's talk about Elizabeth. Elizabeth is Eulalia when she came back through the mirror after being released by Ophelia when she was 11. There is no foreshadowing whatsoever that Elizabeth is Eulalia. There is nothing there to give hints of any sort. Like, even knowing that this is the case, reading through the passages where Elizabeth talks about herself, talks about her past, like, nothing gives away anything that there is this connection there. And I think that there is a giant missed opportunity because of it. Like, there could have been so much that you could seed in to make that a more impactful reveal in book 4, but it's just not there. Maybe it is in book 4, and I'll have to look for that on my reread of book 4, but at least in book 3, like, I never, ever would be able to guess that Elizabeth is Eulalia. Never. Not in 100 years would I have been able to guess that. And I think that that's just a bit disappointing. I think that this book has done really well with other foreshadowing after everything in the last book with Farouk and his memories and like the little tidbits of how he's connecting Ophelia to Eulalia, but then also the other. We got some really great foreshadowing in that book. And then this book, where you have like this character that you could just set up with the foreshadowing, and it's not there. It's a bit mind-boggling, actually, why there is so little foreshadowing. There's no foreshadowing for Elizabeth whatsoever, and I really feel like there should be at least something. I think the closest that we can get to foreshadowing with Elizabeth is the fact that she has such a high revere for Helen, but at the same time, it's explained so well why she does, because Helen gave her a home. So that's not really giving me anything for some secret plot behind the scenes. That's just explaining a character as the character is presented, and it works fine as it is. It doesn't indicate anything extra. The other thing, though, is Elizabeth is the one that comes up with the code that the Forerunners use in the memorial, and I guess that could be an analogy of how she used to come up with languages and the whole books being in her secret language. But at the same time, it's such a tenuous connection. It doesn't give the reveal the punch that it could have. I think that the reveal of Elizabeth being Eulalia could have been punched up so much more if we got some actual foreshadowing in this book and the next book. But moving on from Elizabeth, there are some other bits of foreshadowing that come up in this book that I thought were done quite nicely. There is a line about Ambrose and how his father thinks he is important to the city, which makes a lot of sense once you know that Ambrose is actually an echo of the real Ambrose, who was very important to the city. There's also some foreshadowing that Blaise was at the observatory when he mentions Lazarus being a teacher, and I believe Lazarus is said to be a teacher at the observatory at some point in the 4th book, like in the past. He was a teacher at some point in the past at the observatory, and Blaise was there. But finally, the actually really good foreshadowing that was in this book happens in the same scene. There's 2 bits of it, and I loved it so much. So It's the scene where Ophelia has been put into the timeout capsule and she is able to go through the mirror of it and come out in the secretarium. And coming out of the mirror, she thinks that she shouldn't be able to do this because she's never reflected in the mirror, and therefore it's breaking all the laws of animus physics. Except she, of course, combined slightly with Eulea when she released Eulea from the mirror when she was 11. So Eulea did reflect in the mirror, hence why Ophelia is able to go through the mirror into the secretarium, which I thought was incredibly clever, and I really, really liked that. The other thing is, in the same scene, there is a section where Ophelia is looking at the mirror and she goes, "I am Ophelia," and the mirror responds, "I am Eulea." And I thought that that was really nicely done in terms of the fact that the person that Ophelia released from the mirror was actually Eulea and not the other. So when she has in the past looked into the mirror and seen Eulea, who she now looks like, it has actually been Eulea that has been in the mirror. This is less foreshadowing and more is able to be explained once you know what the hell is going on in book 4. But I thought it was a really nice moment. But particularly Ophelia being able to go through that mirror because Eulea has reflected in it and she is combined with Eulea. I thought that was brilliant. I thought that was really, really nicely done, and I really, really liked it. That is The Memory of Babel by Christelle Dabos. I do think this is a very good book. I just think it sits really weirdly in the series, but the book itself is really good. It has some amazing moments in it. It's got incredible character work, like with all of Christelle Dabos's books. If you have made it to the end of the video, let's leave a heart emoji today just to see if anyone makes it through to the end of this. Have you read The Memory of Babel? What do you think of this book? Did you think that it fit well into the series, or are you like me and think it sits a little bit weirdly outside of where it really should be? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Thank you for watching, everyone. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all next time. Bye!